Dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to start the next webinar from the Innovative Universities series. Today, we continue our journey in Asia, and we are moving to very interesting university where West really met East. One of the best universities in the world, Yale University, opened its college at one of the best universities in Asia, and by the way, now also one of the best universities in the world, National University of Singapore. It was a brave attempt to bring classical tradition of liberal arts and sciences into high education system that heavily influenced by Confucian Eastern tradition. And I had a pleasure to visit this place. It's very interesting residential campus with wonderful oriental gardens, with students all over the world, with books all over the world, and with very passionate president, Professor Joanne Roberts, who is Canadian from quite cold place. She worked in Calgary, for example, in Toronto, in Calgary, and she's an economist. By the way, I forgot to say a few words about our timetable. Could I have the previous slide, please? So our webinars are 60 minutes each, 15, 20 minutes maximum presentation, then live discussion interview with two moderators, myself, Isaac Flumin, and Dara Melnik, higher education consultant. The recording of our seminars are available on YouTube, and you can ask questions using Q&A functions. And it's my great pleasure now. Sorry, I messed up the order of slides a bit, but now it's my great pleasure to invite Professor Joanne Roberts to tell us a bit about this innovative university, about challenges and successes and lessons. Joan, it's my pleasure. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to get to be here and to speak to you all. Yale-NUS is definitely a passion project. It's a passion of two former presidents, President Tan-Chor Chuan of NUS and President Rick Levin of Yale. And what they wanted to form was a liberal arts college in Asia. And I think that the most articulate statement of that is the vision of Yale-NUS, which is a community of learning founded by two great universities in Asia for the world. And this is really what we've attempted to build, to bring to Singapore its first liberal arts college, bringing the very best of that liberal arts tradition, which is more commonly found in the United States, and having it find a real home here in Singapore. And I'll tell you a little bit about that journey, but perhaps I'll start with a bit of a timeline, because the timeline itself is perhaps interesting. It was only just over 10 years ago that the college was established by an agreement between Yale and NUS. And since then, we've now had a series of amazing cohorts of students that I'll tell you a bit more about. And finally, in 2021, exactly 10 years after the founding of the college, it was announced that the college will close. And so I am the third and final president, and the college will close in 2025, and it will transform itself into a new entity called NUS College. And I can tell you a little bit about that as we go. But where did this idea of this college start? And I think one of the things that was so exciting about Yale-NUS is that it was not, it was not seen as a franchise model where you might take a a liberal education at Yale and transplant it into Asia, but rather seen as a moment where a group of faculty got together with a blank piece of paper and thought, what is it that we think would be the best liberal education in the world? And the curriculum was animated by the question that you see on the screen now: what must a young person learn in order to lead a responsible life in this century? And the answer to that, or one answer to that, is what we've tried to develop at Yale-NUS College. Basically, a vision of an educational model where students have explore a very broad course of study across a variety of disciplines, one that is propelled by interest, but also requires students to take very diverse area of study and to sit sometimes in courses and in areas that are a little bit less comfortable to them. So requiring them to take courses in the humanities, the social sciences, and in the physical sciences. And as well as that, this is a fully residential model. So students live on campus for all 4 years of their education. So it's an intensive environment. Also thinking about, what do you do in the classroom? I think one of the most innovative things and one of the most intentional things that we've done at Yale-NUS is to try and intentionally develop a global and intercultural perspective within the curriculum. When you think about liberal arts, there are moments in some places where liberal arts education really centers around reading the great books of Western thought. Yale-NUS, it felt very important to recognize the fact that we're in Asia and we wanted to have a global intercultural perspective. So to have students read Aristotle and also to learn the teachings of Confucius. And so how did we do this? Well, we developed a 1.5-year-long program that we call the Common Curriculum. It's taken by all students. They take it in lockstep in sequence. It's extremely broad, covering the humanities, social sciences, and sciences. It's team taught, which means that within one class, you might have an economist and a psychologist and a political scientist all sharing, with an anthropologist, what they think about the family or the state or items like this. And this has been not only a very important part for our students, but has also really transformed the way I think our faculty have thought about the college. And what it does is it embeds this intercultural learning right into the curriculum. It also fosters what we think is a lot of curiosity and persistence, partly because it's all prescribed. There's no choice. No student can avoid something that feels uncomfortable. So this is our first 1.5 years. I have to say, I've seen a few of these talks before and everyone has beautiful slides, so I've attempted to go with that theme. This just gives you a bit of a sense of the span of materials. Again, not just East meets West, but very much a global perspective. What is it that an educated person should know for this century? It's perhaps something different than what they needed to know a century ago or 2 centuries ago. After our students finish this extensive course of study, which really prioritizes critical thinking, writing, and speaking and quantitative skills, they move on and they take many of the traditional majors and they declare their major at the end of the 2nd year. Our majors have many of the traditional liberal arts majors. That might be literature, philosophy, economics, but we also have a few more interdisciplinary majors like global affairs, urban studies, and environmental studies. And so our goal is to go broad and then also to allow students to go deep. We've attempted to leverage off the partnerships that we have with Yale and NUS, and we have a few ways in which students in 5 years can finish their liberal arts education and also get a master's degree or a law degree at NUS. So Yale-NUS, I think of it as sitting on 3 pillars. The first one being this amazing common curriculum, and then the second one being experiential learning. So we are blessed to be in truly an amazing location in Singapore, dynamic center in Asia. And so from the very beginning, we have been attempting to get our students out of the classroom and into other types of environments for learning. We have a dedicated office here called the Center for International and Professional Experience. And they have a few signature programs. One, week 7. We stop all of our classes in the first semester for 1 week during week 7, and we have students go out on small faculty-led excursions. Sometimes in Singapore, for example, we once had an excursion where they went out and learned about shipping, and they even got to go around the port and traipse across a large container ship. Sometimes they go other places. For example, we had a week-long trip where a psychologist and a political scientist took a group of students to South Africa to discuss society post-apartheid and everywhere in between. And this has been not only is an amazing experience to be on a small faculty-led trip, but also to have the kind of experience, that kind of intimacy that you get from spending a week intensively in a different location with fellow students and faculty. We run something similar that's on a slightly larger scale called Learning Across Boundaries, sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks in May. Again, faculty-led mini courses. For example, we're having one coming up in Thailand, which is on alternative proteins. And so a group of brave students is going to go and experiment with eating a variety of insects. And I look forward to hearing about that. Beyond that, we also encourage our students to get out. 80% of our students do study abroad, even more do summer programs, internships. We push them out into the world. And this is another crucial component of our education and also of this kind of intercultural engagement that we prioritize. As I told you, I have pictures. These are some students in Nepal, in Indonesia, a class in Indonesia, some students in France, and it goes on. The third pillar that I think that Yale-NUS is really built on is our residential experience. In the best of the American liberal arts tradition, we have a fully residential curriculum and program, which means our students live on campus for all 4 years of their education. And this provides another entire set of opportunities for them to learn. Many faculty and staff also live on campus. For example, I live on campus with my family and my puppy dog, and it means that you spend a lot of time, not just in the classroom, but in a lot of different spaces with students. And I think this is a really crucial part of what we do here and how we go about living together. Within this residential program, we've developed a very intentional program. Of course, we prioritize a lot of the things that many colleges prioritize now: wellness, counseling, athletics, student organizations. But we've gone beyond that, and we've developed a full residential curriculum and largely focused on 3 primary themes. 1, wellness. How do you care for yourself? 2, intercultural engagement across all different types of notions, religion, race, sexuality, gender. And 3rd, service to community. And we do this through a whole series of intentionally curated programs. It begins with orientation. And in the first year, we have students divided into small groups, call them residential RCA groups, residential college advisor groups. And those programs are quite relatively mandatory. And then as they progress through the 4 years of their education, the programs become more elective. Would you like to stop by for a conversation on some specific topic, perhaps an interfaith dialogue or something like this? And then we finish it off by the time we get to 4th year with a series of programming that perhaps you could flippantly call adulting, as our students are about to leave the college and head out into the world. So this is a crucial part. In this way, we really are trying to teach our students the very best of how they listen to one another, learn from one another, and live in a diverse community. I'll tell you a little bit about our faculty and admissions and run through a few other things. We have been blessed with just the most extraordinary faculty. We've had over 100 tenure track faculty at our height, many of them on joint appointments with NUS. We've had a lot of amazing visitors come from our parent institutions, Yale and NUS, but also from a variety of other places over the years. And we have attempted to build a very intentional teaching culture, a culture of teaching excellence. And I have to say that our team teaching environment does provide a lot of mentoring and possibility for that. We've also, over the last few years, really attempted to build and grow our research culture. In the beginning, when you're a startup, it's difficult to prioritize both developing teaching and developing research, but we've attempted to have a very active research culture in line with those of our parent institutions. And I can give you, again, because I have nice slides, a few slides that just give you a sense of the kinds of impact I've had in the research field, in the humanities, in sciences, and also in social sciences. I think one of the most important things that we've done here in terms of research, though, is really facilitating student research. Be that getting them out in the mangrove swamps or looking at stars in Chile. We have a very, very high number of students who participated in summer research with faculty. And I think this has been a very crucial part that's led to much of our success when it comes to graduate school placements. Our student body is unique. As far as I know, we're the first place in Singapore to have purely holistic admissions. So we admit students not only based on academic performance, but we also extensively review their other dimensions, their extracurriculars, and whatever else they'd like to share with us. We have extensive financial aid, and well over 50% of our students are on some kind of needs-based funding. And in our final year that we did admissions, we had over 14,000 applications. And this was, just for 250 spots. Each year we've admitted between 40 and 50% of our students from internationally, and the remainder from Singapore. So we have extremely diverse classrooms. And this also, when we live together on campus, is interesting and is an important part of our total experience. I always think that in a sense, how you get a sense of our students is to hear from them, to hear their voices. And I have just a few quick quotes. I'm not exactly one of those going to be a doctor or lawyer types. I was racking my brain. And when I heard this, it was like a moth to a flame. It's an exciting time to be Asian. And this is something we hear from a lot of our students. This is one of my favorite. If someone's going to make a difference at home, it starts from home. And we've seen that many of our students maybe would have thought about going to North America or going somewhere else for this kind of education. And they're delighted to be able to stay in Asia and have an experience that really takes seriously being in Asia, being in this region, and being at home. I think our students also very much, we have one of the most diverse student populations in the world, and I think it's very highly valued. Lastly, I'll just share a little bit about our outcomes. I know many people like metrics. I definitely do. This is from a survey. It's done by the Singapore government, and I can just share a few basic statistics. Oh, sorry, I'm still learning how to use the slides. A few basic statistics. Here you can look and you can see that Yale-NUS students, when they leave after this intensive experience of living together for 4 years, this diverse group of people, it's clear that at the end of that time, they really feel like they're well prepared. They're well prepared in terms of how well they write and they speak, how creatively they think, critical thinking, and basic effectiveness. The only area, and perhaps this isn't surprising for a liberal arts college, where they feel a little less well prepared than perhaps they do in a more traditional education, is in domain expertise. Not surprising, because our degree has a very broad component and they spend a little bit less time on their majors. Our students have also, so how happy they say they are with their education is one metric. Another metric, of course, is to look at how they do in the job market. Our students are extremely highly sought after. This is just a short list of places where they've gone to work. Many of our students, of course, also work in the public sector. They work for NGOs, but they've also been highly sought after for all sorts of different industries, in particular in technology, finance, and consulting. More numbers. Our students, again, this isn't everything, but it does show that our students are extremely marketable. Again, you can see here that our students' salaries, and this is taken 6 months after they graduate, their median salaries are quite significantly higher than they would be in other programs within Singapore. And again, we take this as evidence that the value added that we're giving here is something that the market appreciates. Beyond employment, of course, many of our students go on to graduate school, and we're very, very proud of them. As of right now, approximately 15% of our students leave immediately for graduate school. And they've gone to many of the best graduate programs in the world: Harvard, Yale, MIT, Oxford, Cambridge, Stanford, etc. And we also are extremely proud that even though we haven't been around that long, we already, and I'll have more names to add to these lists soon, but we already have many Rhodes Scholars, Schwarzman Scholars, Fulbright Scholars, again, attesting, I think, to the success of this model of education. Lastly, I'll just tell you a little bit about our campus, because we have a particularly beautiful campus, as you heard in the introduction. It was built by amazing architects, Pelly Clark Pelly, in New Haven, Connecticut, really built intentionally to try to replicate some of the experience of the North American liberal arts residential college, but to replicate it in vertical instead of physical space. So our students, they live in nested suites of rooms that are broken down. The elevators only stop every third floor, so they have to sort of walk up and down and navigate this smaller component. And then also within residential colleges. Our campus has 3 residential colleges that sit next to each other, each with their own courtyard. And this gives exactly that kind of American feeling of a courtyard where you can swing in a hammock during the day. And but again, in vertical instead of horizontal space. And I'll show you a few more pictures. Our beautiful dining halls and courtyards, our small seminar classrooms purpose-built for this kind of education, and our lovely library. Last but not least, I'll mention our looking ahead. So as I mentioned at the beginning, Yale-NUS is closing in 2025. And as president, I've had a bit of time to think about what our legacy is. I think you can tell that I'm extremely proud of our alumni, our faculty, and our staff. And I know that they're going to go off and make a large mark upon the world. I can already see that happening, and I look forward to charting that course. Yale-NUS and its common curriculum has already had a significant impact upon general education at NUS. In fact, NUS has rolled out a common curriculum for all 7,000 of their first-year students. It's not exactly the same as ours, but it has much of the same desire: a broad education covering humanities, social sciences, and sciences, a strong quantitative background. And I think that we can see the mark of Yale-NUS on that NUS common curriculum as well. And lastly, Yale-NUS College and our campus is evolving into a new entity called NUS College, which will be an honors college. It'll have a quite intensive 2-year experience, and then students will go out to NUS to study their majors. So not a traditional liberal arts college, but more of an honors college. And I think in that, we'll see much of the Yale-NUS common curriculum live on here, as well as our very lively and intentional residential community. And that gives you a quick overview of Yale-NUS. It's been a busy 10 years, and I'm very happy. I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this absolutely lovely presentation. So in the beginning, I would like to go to the beginning. Could you please summarize which problems were Yale-NUS a response to?
I don't know if it's a problem per se, but the Ministry of Education in Singapore has always been interested in new models of education and sort of having a diverse landscape. And so the idea of a liberal arts college came from that kind of appetite within Singapore to continue to build and to diversify the local landscape. I think there was an appetite for a liberal arts college in part because this idea that a broad-based education is excellent for many, if you like, these future skills, these soft skills: communication, collaboration, creation, innovation. And I think that was really at the heart of that decision. And so that is where it started on the Singaporean side. You know, there was a MOE study that suggested founding a liberal arts college. It's hard for me to speak for everyone, but I think on the Yale side, there was really a desire to engage internationally. We are the first place outside of New Haven, Connecticut, that institution that Yale has given its its name to. That's a degree granting place, and that's exciting. And I think for Yale, really wanting to have a foothold and have an impact here, and to think about how liberal education can spread around the world. So I think these were on both sides. There was this moment of the meeting of the minds. And, you know, I don't know that I'd say there's a problem with the education at NUS. I think it's an amazing education. This is very much on a smaller, different scale. You know, NUS has 7,000 students, first-year students. We have 250. And it allows us a little bit of, if you like, a sandbox to experiment a bit with here. And I'm excited to see some of our learnings going out and being applied more widely in Singapore.
So towards that, you mentioned, Isak, see you. You mentioned that NUS has copied some aspects of Yale and US approaches already. What about the wider impact on Singaporean higher education and maybe on higher education in Asia in general?
I think, you know, again, I think when you look around the higher education in Singapore, I think many of us have been moving in the same direction. I don't want to take too much credit for the innovation at other places. SMU has a very nice core curriculum, and Lily Kong, the president there, was one of the founders of Yale-NUS, again, with this kind of breadth of knowledge and across all of the domains. So I think when you look across NUS, you can see this desire for a strong multidisciplinary education. And, you know, so going broad and deep. And that has really been a sort of across Singapore, you can see this kind of movement. Looking out at Asia more widely, it's hard for me to know. I imagine people in the audience and some of you who've been going to these webinars have a better sense than I do. I think that there has been an appetite for liberal arts. We definitely are part of that kind of global conversation, I think. We try to visit other places, and other places have been to visit us, and try to learn from what we see as best practices. But I think it's definitely the case that there is some curiosity and some appetite within Asia for this kind of education.
Isak, please.
Yeah, I thank you very much. I'm also fascinated. I noticed a couple of quite unusual things, innovative, like team teaching. How it happened, and forgive my administrative question, but who is getting paid for team teaching among professors? And
yeah.
The next innovation I feel is lab experience. So could you also say a few words about this particular two innovations? And my last question, which is big one, is there are a lot of universities claim that they are embedding intercultural learning into their curriculum. Does it mean that you provide them with different books, from Confucius to Socrates, or to Plato, sorry, or something else? What besides environment? What is intentionally developed? In today's world, we feel that it's extremely important content. Thank you.
I think so too. Let me start with team teaching. I think there are a lot of different models of team teaching, and you're right. Sometimes when we do team teaching, it can be the case that there are two faculty members in the room at the same time, and that can lead you to the feeling that you're, I don't want to sound too dismissive, but almost that you're double paying for a course. It's twice as expensive to have two faculty in the room. Our model of team teaching, part of the nice thing about team teaching is that you can have a bunch of different faculty who all come with a different methodological lens. And so for example, perhaps you're in a social science course and you're talking about the family. You can have an anthropologist and an economist and a psychologist, and they're all thinking about the family differently, and that can jointly inform the conversation. The way that we've done team teaching here is we have large classes that meet once a week for a lecture. And then they break out into seminars of 18 people. So you would have 250 first-year students all in a course called Lit Hum. And you might have one faculty member give a 1-hour lecture on on the Odyssey and the travels of Odysseus. And then they split off into a lot of different small classes, depending on the course, 12 or 14 of these small seminar classes. And each faculty member would lead 1 or 2 small seminars and would give 1 or 2 of these lectures every semester. And this gives you a bit of breadth, a bit of different perspectives in the lecture, and the seminars are a bit smaller. And this is the way that we've implemented much of our team teaching. In other areas, for example, our quantitative reasoning, there's no common lecture. It's all, it's a team that jointly develops the syllabus, but then they're each delivering in their own class an entirely flipped class experience. So they're all sitting around in groups on their laptops, working together. But again, the curriculum itself was developed by a team, and one example might be they might have one week be doing some quantitative work using a political science example, and another week something using epidemiology. And again, trying to have this diversity of different views and different approaches. That's how we've managed team teaching. Our lab experience, we have 2 different kinds of, do you mean the learning across boundaries or our science labs? Learning across boundaries. So learning across boundaries it's been an amazing program. Taking a small group of students, maybe around 18 or 20, 1 or 2 faculty members and a few staff members, and setting out on some adventure. We have students apply for the opportunities. So for example, this year we're running 2 labs in the coming semester. One is, as I said, alternative proteins in Thailand. I imagine we'll have a lot of students who are interested in going and doing sort of an intensive 2-week deep dive into that. Often there's some pre-reading. Sometimes there are a few days spent here with some lectures, and then really a desire to get people out into the field, give them an opportunity to meet experts. We normally do it in May, and so it doesn't interfere with the rest of the summer. In a sense, students can take a couple weeks, do a lab experience, and then do an internship or do something else for the rest of the summer. And so we've been running a few of those every year, and occasionally we've run them in December for a week or 2, and occasionally during recess week for a week. These are not the most inexpensive programs we run, but students find them really impactful, and I think it's a model that is quite fun. Lastly, how do we embed intercultural education? We're constantly learning, but we attempt to begin an orientation with some sessions, sort of introducing students to the values of the campus. Then we follow up by training our RCAs, which are upper year students who run a small group, residential college advisor groups, providing them with some training so that they can lead some facilitated conversations on specific topics throughout the semester. Sometimes those topics are things that are, it could even be something as simple as getting enough sleep in college. But we also try to have them engage with conversations on cross-cultural communication, conflict resolution, how to manage your relationships within your suites. One thing with such a diverse group of students, it's really, every day is an experience in intercultural education. I remember the first time that I taught here, I think I had, 12 students in my class and probably representing 7 or 8 different countries. And so when I'd say something like, oh, in North America, it's like this, and I'd be like, it's not like that in India, and it's definitely not like that in Kenya. And I think that is really a place where just this project of living together. But I do agree that being intentional, thinking, what are the learning objectives that we have within this area? How do we build in programming and build in a lot of it early enough? So when you build it into the orientation and into that first year program, you're getting considerable sign up for that. We also, every year, we run a week of programming, which is called Diversity Week. And again, very intentional programs around all of these themes. And so we're constantly learning, constantly trying new things, but we've tried to bake it in from the beginning that these are the kinds of conversations we want to have.
So I just want to follow up a little bit on team teaching. It's kind of increasingly common occurrence, especially at innovative experimental universities. So what would you give as an advice on how to set it up? Which challenges have you noticed over the years? Because even prior to becoming president, you were vice president for academic affairs. So yeah. How do we go about it?
It is, I think it is challenging in a variety of ways. This college started out with an advantage that we had a founding faculty who spent a year in developing the beginning of the common curriculum. And they worked together in small groups to develop these foundational courses. And it gave all of those people a really strong sense of ownership. There are challenges. It's the case that, it's a diverse, and many people find it quite a demanding curriculum. I'm an economist. You think, oh, you want me to read anthropology and be able to lead a seminar on that? That is difficult for me. And so one part is providing enough support, ensuring that people have time to prepare to deliver that. They have good mentorship within the teams, and you end up with a positive culture within the teams. You also, over the years, as you have people, you have the initial founding faculty, they're teaching it, they developed it together, but you have new arrivals and you have people departing, and you have to have new arrivals feel like they have a feeling of some ownership and some authorship in those courses as well. And I think that has always been a little bit of a challenge. Some faculty feel like, hey, I just got these readings down. I just understand this material. And now you've hired a new person who has a different expertise and they want to do a lecture, and there's a lot more to prepare. I think that it's a large ship, one of these huge team talk courses. So it can be difficult to pivot in that kind of way. At the same time, I've had people here who have said to me, I feel so bad for new faculty who aren't part of a teaching team, who maybe come in and aren't part of one of these large courses, because they don't get integrated. They don't have the mentorship and support. And so I think it's a difficult balance. I think it's important to have teaching feel fair. In some majors, we've had people who do a lot more team teaching than in other majors, and that's just been because of the way our curriculum's designed and shortages that we've had in some areas. The one thing you want is you want it to feel supported, you want it to feel fair, and you want people to feel like they have some voice. And it's a moving target. And I don't know that any year we've hit it perfectly, but when I hear things like faculty saying, I feel bad for a new faculty member who doesn't get to be part of a team, it does make me think that faculty are seeing some of the benefits of this kind of teaching. And I know some who've gone on and it's changed the direction of their scholarship as well, because of this kind of exposure and these kinds of conversations. And so I think it's worth experimenting with if people have the time and resources and the community buy-in to do it.
So here's a bit of a curveball question coming your way. So you mentioned that common curriculum was based on the idea of what a student should know or a graduate should know in the 21st century. But what do you base that idea on?
I think it's a curveball question. I think we based it on a group of faculty sitting together and thinking about that. And in a way, we weren't driven by the survey, but if you look at the things that government survey was, was assessing, do you feel like you have good communication skills, written and spoken? Do you feel like you can collaborate well in a group? Do you feel like you're nimble and adaptable, that you can handle these kind of situations, that you can, et cetera, et cetera? I think these are really the skills that all of us talk about as the skills for this century. Less so, how do you program in C++, and more so, how do you adapt to an ever-changing world, and how do you find your way in community with others? And I think that was really, those are really the goals. It'll only be, I think, in a bit of time when we go back to our alums and ask them, that we'll know whether or not we really equipped them with everything they needed to know for this century. But yeah.
So basically, it's kind of a synthesis of what faculties from different disciplines believe a new person for the new times should be and the way they should act. Have I understood correctly?
I think so. I mean, I think that the curriculum development that we did here was very much built on this kind of collegial notion that you get a group of faculty together and you develop it in common. So yes, I would definitely say that it is a lot of the skills that everyone talks about: critical thinking, to read well, to listen well, to speak well. And it is sort of a synthesis of those things. But our common curriculum has never been static. Every time a faculty member joins and steps into one of these courses, it shifts what's taught in a subtle way. We've done a constant process of review. By the time our closure was announced, we'd done 3 full common curriculum reviews, and each time adjusted the balance of what we were teaching and how we were teaching, and trying to, to deal with what we were hearing from faculty and students, what was effective, what wasn't effective, what was hitting home. And so in a way, I have always thought that the amazing thing about our common curriculum was less about what was actually taught and more about that process of a group of faculty constantly questioning and refining and assessing and learning from one another. And which is, I think, a different way to think about a curriculum, instead of it being set in stone, but it being a process of evolution. And in that way, I don't know that we have the perfect curriculum, because I don't know that it exists, but it's in motion constantly.
Sorry, can I just jump to clarify one thing?
Yes, of course.
Why? So I thought that you developed very good curriculum, and you are happy with that. So until, I don't know, artificial intelligence comes to the picture. But why professors come together, and what questions they ask when they suddenly decide to view the curriculum? So I thought that it was external review of the curriculum, but from your description, it was kind of bottom-up initiative. So it sounds...
We've always done the sandwich review. So all 3 of our reviews were both. We've always done a self-study, and at the end of every year, there's a bit of a self-study of the course. But extensive ones we've done 3 times. So bottom up, sort of speaking to our students, reading through everything they've given to us, speaking to the teams, what worked, what didn't work well. Do we feel like we have too much of this and too little of this? And then also bringing in external reviewers. And so both directions, not always making huge changes, but is it the case that this course is as well integrated with that course as it could be? Is it the case that we're seeing students deliver on the writing objectives that we want? Is it the case that these skills are durable, and we're seeing that the quantitative skills they develop in this course are still there a year from now? Are students happy with the way that we're teaching them the program and are? And so it is sort of trying to take all of that in. If anything, I think maybe we've been a bit overzealous in refining, because it's difficult to keep changing things, but it's also part of the startup, and being a little assessment crazy in the beginning, but it's part of the startup desire to keep perfecting.
So whenever the residential campus model is mentioned, going to another pillar apart from common curriculum, especially in discussions about liberal arts colleges or university colleges in Europe, and we ask what are the issues with the residential model, the only issue we hear about is money. It's expensive, so that's why some colleges can afford it, some cannot afford it, and that's really the only problem. So my umbrella question is, what are some other issues with the residential model and how have you solved them? And we've also got a question from the audience towards the same topic from Laura Smith. She's asking whether you could describe the process of gaining support from staff and students for the residential curriculum. And did you encounter any challenges in engaging students and in students finding time to participate in the residential life programming, especially given that your curriculum is already quite rigorous and demanding?
Yeah, I think let me start at the beginning. I think that a residential model, it's true, it's expensive, and we've had a number of issues here. For the most part, students have been very, very happy with their residential experience, but we're in a very small country. And so we have a lot of international, just to give you one small example, but it can feel significant to students. We have a lot of students who go home for the weekends. So many Singaporean students go home for the weekends, and I don't blame them. They get their laundry done and a nice hot meal. And then we have international students and exchange students who are here on campus and feeling like they're not necessarily having the experience that they were hoping for. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to think, how do we make sure that the weekends are as dynamic or as invigorating? One thing we haven't wanted to do was have suites of students that are all international and suites of students that are all Singaporean. We wanted to have that mix. And yet, if you're the only exchange student in a suite that has all Singaporean students, they're not there on the weekend. And so I think some of these things we have faced in a big way. We also have a very diverse community. Every single year we've had issues with food. We have a great dining hall staff. They do their very best, but a lot of people have a lot of different preferences, and it's difficult to make people from over 70 countries all happy at the same time with the food, whether it be too salty, not salty enough, too spicy, not spicy enough, too much rice, not enough rice. You get the idea. It's been a challenge, and our vendor is amazing and does their very best, but we have a lot of these kinds of issues. How to get student buy-in? I will say that it is challenging. We actually, much of our senior week, our senior year, we have seniors, they're finishing off their capstones, they're looking for work, and yet they feel a little bit unprepared. They've been living in residence for 4 years. Maybe this is the only experience they've ever had living away from home. How are they going to find an apartment? How do you do any of that basic adulting stuff? In that case, we've actually pushed a lot of our residential curriculum for our seniors into what we call senior week, which is right around graduation. So we let them submit their capstones, finish their finals, and then they get to stay on campus for a week, and we try to push it in there. And I think that has made a difference. We have better attendance. We still have a number of students who would rather go to Bali than stay here and learn how to find a rental apartment. But this is one place. Another thing that we've done is we've really tried to push in a lot of our important programming early, because we find we have much higher participation rates early. And then in their second and third year, it's much more interest driven. Someone who wants to come to a discussion on I don't know, learning accommodations and ADHD and something like that, they can pop in for that, but it's not mandatory. And we find that people select into the programs that feel meaningful for them, and we don't have 100% take up. So basically, we try to leverage off orientation, and we've experimented a lot, to try and have a big impact in the first year, and we've experimented a lot with the final year, and trying to find a way. And then in between, we just let students pick and choose what interests them. And it's worked relatively well, I think. We also, of course, have been assessing, we get feedback, and we try to keep tailoring the program to students' interests, and that makes a difference too.
So you mentioned in the beginning and then later on that in 2025, Yale-NUS ceases to exist, and
Yes.
its model will be kind of inspiring for an inspiration for NUS College. And I see that you are taking it quite joyously. So the question here, which I think is relevant for a lot of new institutions, well, as much as you can, for a lot of new institutions, how do you transition from one state to another? What is the best way to do that? Because not every new development stays forever, and higher education is quite dynamic.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult thing. I laughed when you said joyously because I don't think that's the the adverb that I would use. This has been a difficult process. It's difficult for everyone involved. It's difficult for our students who know that they'll be alums of an institution that doesn't exist, although they will still have a variety of services provided by NUS and Yale. It's difficult for our staff and faculty who made decisions with their careers to be here and to be part of this. We're doing our very best to manage it as well as we can. We've worked with NUS and Yale to secure support for our alumni. We've had very good support for NUS, basically that everyone who works here, staff or faculty, have had their contracts transitioned over to NUS. Not everyone was interested in that, but in a lot of ways, we're in a much better place than many other places that have had this kind of decision made and have faced this kind of disruption. So for us, we're working on providing the very best experience we can until 2025, ensuring that all these students have all of the experiences of all the preceding classes, and then to make sure that all of our staff and faculty have good transitions and good opportunities ahead. But I think it's challenging to manage. And, I am grateful that I work with really just the most amazing colleagues. And, I think all of us who joined Yale-NUS, we really bought into that mission, community of learning in Asia for the world. And I feel really grateful that I get to be with them and to make sure that we end this process with integrity and energy and hopefully a little bit of grace. And they do make me feel quite a bit of joy and optimism. Yes.
Yes, perhaps gracefully should have been the word I should have used instead of joyously. But once you do transition, perhaps you could share that experience with other institutions around the world. So here's perhaps one of the last questions. Which lessons can you share from your experience leading the institution over these years?
This has been a great privilege to be part of a place like Yale-NUS. I will, I have to return to the fact that I work with amazing colleagues and we have amazing students. But I really believe that at its core, what has made Yale-NUS so special, and it started with that faculty curriculum planning moment, was the idea that this is a place that's co-created. It's co-created by a group of faculty together. It's co-created with students. Their input always matters. Their voices matter. They had a lot of voice in terms of developing what this college would look like, what our priorities would be. And I think I feel that every day as I walk around. And so for me, this is the most powerful thing. Our priorities on wellness, intercultural engagement, service to community, these come from us seeing our students, seeing what they value, seeing how they want to be in the world, what they want what values they want to live, and then us building a curriculum that helps them meet those goals. And so I guess the one piece of advice I would have, if you have the privilege of working in a place that is this small, it can really be a joint endeavor and something that you create together. And so I think I've said before, there are times when I've thought we've assessed and reviewed and surveyed a little bit too much, and maybe we have, and yet it was built into our DNA that this is the kind of place that we were. My other advice is all pretty generic. If you hire the very best people that you can, try to keep people aligned, hire people who believe in the mission as much as you do. And we have been very, very lucky in that regard. And I think that is what has allowed us to charge forward into, these somewhat, ambiguous times with the energy that we have.
So thankfully, we still have a couple of more minutes, and I'll sneak another question in. Yes, Isaac?
Yeah. Could you be more specific, John? Do you hear me well? I have some connection issues.
I think I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Could you be more specific? We see now, in fact, we discussed recently the experience of University College Maastricht and broader liberal arts colleges around Europe. Do you think that what would be what would be specific recommendations for the universities that do not establish separate liberal arts college? How they make their traditional curriculum more relevant for the goal you put in the very beginning?
I think it's a good question. I mean, I think that the kind of path that NUS has taken of trying to develop a common curriculum or a foundational curriculum that is broad, that focuses on skills and, moving away from a very targeted, major-driven, highly specific curriculum to one that has a lot of this liberal education with a very broad foundational skills in terms of critical thinking, communication, and a curiosity and sensitivity about the world, is, I guess, the first step that I would recommend. I don't know if that's too short an answer, but I think it is quite difficult. I mean, I'll be honest, we have had a lot of support. And with that, many of the programs that I've told you about today, our Week 7 program, our labs program, the extensive support for study abroad, even our residential model, none of this is inexpensive, and it's difficult to do at scale. And I think that that is part of the reason why it's sometimes for larger places difficult to figure out where to start. I think I would start with a broad curriculum and prioritizing writing, listening, speaking in the ways that one can as a foundation. Yeah.
And still have about a minute for my question. The time we discussed University College Maastricht, we also touched upon Amsterdam University College, which is just like Yale-NUS, a joint initiative. And we did not have a chance then to get an advice on how to establish joint initiatives. What would you recommend to institutions that want to create something together?
I think that I guess it's an interesting moment, and I'm at a joint initiative that hasn't lasted. I think what I would say about anyone who wants to have a joint initiative is that things change over time, and joint ventures of any kind, they last as long as there's good alignment in terms of what the goals of that partnership are. And I think that's probably the most crucial piece. How is it that we keep communication where it needs to be, and we stay aligned? And here, I think we've had a great partnership, and both Yale and NUS have been amazing partners. And NUS is pivoting a little bit to something that's a bit less elite, a little thinking, how do we take some of the lessons and make them more scalable for a larger Singaporean audience? And that I can really appreciate and value. But ultimately, when the alignment, if there isn't enough alignment, a partnership can't succeed. So my advice is to build on a very stable foundation and to stay in constant communication about goals and priorities, and be nimble if you can be.
That seems like a very sound advice that a lot of you. John, thank you very much from us and on behalf of the audience for the enlightening discussion. Dear all, we are finishing our webinar now. So yes, could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, there we go. So we will see you in 2 weeks, as on Thursday, as it usually happens, for the seminar about another institution in Asia, about the Southern University of Science and Technology, which is an absolutely fantastic institution in Shenzhen, China. It is considered officially an experimentation platform for Chinese higher education. So we'll see how it works, whether an institution can be assigned to be an experimental site, and whether it has had some impact on Chinese and wider Asian higher education. Thank you all for attending, and we'll see you next time.